This is Taurus with Taurus Tech. I wanted to share some information about what I'm seeing taking place in the industry right now. If you ever see a building that has a letter grade on it, that letter grade has to do with local law 97. And based upon the letter grade that you have on your building, that's going to determine if you're getting fines or not. And the fines are actually starting pretty much at the end of this year. So this is one of the organizations that we work with. They have a number of different buildings. New York City essentially wants all buildings to get rid of gas and oil and install heat pumps. This building right here is 134,000 square feet, and their fines starting at the end of this year basically are going to be $80,000 per year, and they're actually going to increase 20% per year. That's how you get, by 2030, you're getting to $120,000. Here's another building that they have that's only 25,000 square feet, and they're going to be getting fines. This particular building it's a residential building, but they have something called an absorption system. An absorption system is essentially a boiler, but this boiler can produce heating and cooling. You have an evaporator, condenser, same way you would have with a regular chiller. The absorption component of it, you're using a fluid that can absorb gas, and then the generator is essentially like a boiler. The absorption chiller was very popular in a lot of buildings in New York City because it meant that you did not need to have an operating engineer. In fact, this particular building, they installed this absorption chiller and the cooling tower and all this stuff in like 2017. Now here we are in 2024, and they're about to get six-figure fines because of the presence of this machine. So as I am giving them suggestions on the type of equipment that they can install, and I'm talking to different suppliers, we're running into now a completely different problem, which is that the EPA has banned HFC refrigerants. So HFC refrigerants were considered better refrigerants than the old CFC or HCFC refrigerants, which had chlorine, and they would destroy the ozone layer. The problem is the HFC refrigerants contribute to global warming, so they phase those out. So now the phase out has begun for HFC refrigerants starting at the end of this year. So you see here, I'm talking with one of my distributors, and they're saying this piece of equipment is obsolete. So then I say, what about this next one? That's obsolete. What about this next one? That's obsolete. The manufacturers are no longer making equipment that has HFC refrigerants, and they're just going to allow what currently exists to sell out. Once you get up to this size, that can no longer be purchased after the end of this year. When we talk about the different types of refrigerants, A1 means non-toxic, no flammability. B1 is highly toxic, non-flammable. B2 is highly toxic and slightly flammable. And then B3 is highly toxic and then very, very flammable. So the refrigerants that they're replacing the HFCs with are slightly flammable. So they came up with a whole new category for these refrigerants called A2L. Low flammability. I'm doing research now trying to see, is this going to require different types of leak detection sensors, fire safety equipment? Because you're talking about new equipment that the manufacturers are going to be basically ramping up from scratch, the costs are going to go up. I've already talked to my manufacturers and distributors, and they're saying, yes, the cost is going to go up at least 20%. It might go up more than that. But once you start to add on all the additions that are going to need to go on to the equipment, now you could be talking about 50% to 100% increase over the existing equipment. But that's not the biggest thing that I discovered. This is talking about the requirements for the New York City refrigeration operating engineer. This was the rule of thumb for how they would determine if a building needed an engineer. It would be by the kilowatts or the horsepower. Now remember, the conversation that we started had to do with the absorption system that particular building had. Because you're not using electricity to drive the compressor, absorption systems fell outside of this 50 kilowatt or 50 horsepower requirement. With the new systems, they're not going to be A1. Everything that I'm reading is saying that A2L is going to be looked at the same way A2 was. And now when you're talking about A2L, then they're going to go by pounds of refrigerant. So all of these buildings that thought they were getting out of these requirements, not only are they going to have to incur the expense of replacing all their heating equipment with heat pumps, now they're going to have licensed engineers.